So few tests all in the small category, to the extent that there is a category there. On previous testing clubs, we've talked about the idea of legitimating small gifts, that you say even a penny would help or even a dollar would help. And the original study on this was for American Cancer, and it was in face-to-face, and it was in the 70s. And so putting in even a penny would help increase the response rate. They have done since follow-up studies to that show that even a penny helps. And then even a dollar does also help, but not as much. And so the work to legitimate this in face-to-face is pretty strong, but not a lot of this in mail or digital or any sort of asynchronous media. And the reason this probably works is that giving's a two-step choice, in that you first decide, should I give? Is this an organization that I'm going to give to, cause to, that sort of thing? And then usually then do you consider how much? And so you can lose people by asking for too much in the should I give phase, but you can't really gain people, except if you're saying, oh, I'm not going to be asking for much. Even a penny would help. Okay, I feel comfortable with that. Let's continue the ask. So that could help. The new study on this is whether this works with chatbots. And this is something that UNICEF actually had an interesting use of chatbots in Romania to help Ukrainian refugees, where they were using chatbots for programmatic services. And so there is some opportunity here, and we are getting to the point that they can be intelligent enough to be used in nonprofit work. So the researchers went in and said, okay, we'll have 3 different types, same chatbot, but 3 different images for it. We're going to have text only. We'll have an image of a robot, and then we'll have a human image. How much can we anthropomorphize or put a human face on this chatbot? And then there were 2 different types of messages. There was the standard message, and then there was what they call legitimizing paltry favors, because everything needs a 3-letter acronym. But it's this idea of even a penny would help, or even a. And so they use the message, even a small amount will make a big difference. So that was their legitimation message. And it was, hello, welcome to Fund Me. Is there a human or robot image? Sometimes there is not. And so then they went into the campaign details about Ukraine using UNICEF messaging, if memory serves. So a 3x2 grid. So there are 6 options here. And the results were people who got the message that said even a small amount will make a difference were significantly more likely to donate than those who got the standard message. So that message was effective. And then for the chatbot part of it, people who got a human image of the chatbot said, oh, there's a greater need, and were more willing to donate. And so a successful technique for both hypotheses there. So that's our first getting small test. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I have a question. So that, to me, it sounded like this was more in a was that a call or a conversation with to ask, or it was that done as a mailing?
This was actually online, and it was done with a perceived online chatbot that had a fairly simple flow to it. Hi, welcome to, and they used Amazon Mechanical Turk to recruit test subjects for this. So they were getting kind of random subjects to go through this chat interface.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
No problem.
So, Nick, I'm wondering if the increase in response rate with the lower amounts would result in a larger overall amount raised, or if your amount raised decreases, but your response rate increases.
By and large, the studies that have looked at the even a penny would help language show either no or very small differences in the average gift. So you're not actually suppressing the gift amount by saying that. And when
Okay.
they do show a slight decrease, it's a slight decrease, but overall revenues tend to go up. So it is a technique that can work without suppressing in the cases that I have seen in the research, at least.
Okay. And have you seen the same research or testing done in a direct mail environment?
I have actually used it personally in a direct mail environment. Even a small amount will make a difference, and it's been effective there. I have not seen a published study on it, I will say.
Okay, because that's a question that we often grapple with, especially on acquisition mailings, when you don't have a donor gift history. It's like, do you ask them for like $5, or is that setting them up to be a lower donor? Is the response rate more important than the average gift and that lifetime value of that donor that you acquire with a small ask amount?
Yeah. And I would say that your ask string should probably still be a bit elevated, because we know those $5 and $10 donors tend not to have higher lifetime values. So in the text you can say, or in the PS is where I often put this, even a small amount will make a big difference. And then you get to the ask string, and it might start at, depending on the organization, $15, $20, somewhere in there. So you're saying even a small amount will make a big difference. You're priming them to larger gifts. So there's still some opportunity for larger donations there.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions on that one? Okay. Then we'll talk about we're getting small in terms of one story and the identifiable victim effect. This is something we've talked about it also on these calls, but as a quick primer, people by and large will tend to identify more with a person and an individual person. There's a separate study. So in this case, they have, here's a statistical outlay of what's going on in Zambia, and in Malawi and in Angola and in Ethiopia. And then for the identifiable victim, it's you're giving because of Rokia, 7-year-old girl from Mali. And it's not terribly surprising in this context. I mean, the statistical victim paragraph, among other things, it's tragic and yet boring. It's not, it's not a story, and we identify with stories. And so putting that type of statistics in there, even if you also have the victim, can tend to suppress response. However, that does have its limits. And so additional researchers went in, and the control messaging was this bottom messaging, freedom from hunger, where they talk about Sebastiana and her young son Aurelio, and what caring people like you. And can I ask if for folks to put themselves on mute, if you are not, feel free to come off of mute. We want to have a discussion, but thank you. So you have this identifiable victim as your control language. The language that they tested was, we are using programs in Peru with rigorous scientific methodologies, and here's what happened as a result of it. And you can see that they're looking at quartiles of prior gift. So who gave smaller gifts on the left and who gave larger gifts on the right. People who give larger gifts are more likely to respond to this type of scientific messaging, and people who are giving smaller gifts are more responsive to this emotional messaging. And so there's this idea that, and this is a bit of an oversimplification, but there are head gifts and there are heart gifts, and you have more of a heart gift for smaller amounts. But when you're giving more and more and more, you're thinking about it a little bit. If someone were going to ask us for $1,000 gift, we'd have to really ponder that. Whereas a $20 gift, most of us can write that check or put down that credit card without a lot of concern. So there's a lot of research on all of this. And so looking at a meta-analysis of the identifiable victim effect, so 41 different studies on here. What makes it work? It works best when there's one victim, not a group of victims. There's a separate study that talks about, and I bring up this study only because I practiced how to say this word. It talks about entitativity. Yes, entitativity. And that's the idea of, do the people belong to an entity? So if you have a group of people, you can talk about them as this village or this tribe or a group identity that's a singular rather than individual people. And in fact, there's a study that shows that if you have a group of birds and you're asking for donations to it, people are more likely to give if the birds are all flying in the same direction and are part of a flock rather than birds going off in their own directions. So single identified victim, and if you can't get that, a single kind of entity of people who are impacted. Having a picture with name and age, obviously having a child is more impactful for a lot of folks, that the source of need is poverty, and that the victim is not seen as responsible for their plight. And that is, some of these are tough in that when we talk about equity and the stories that we want to tell and strengthening messaging and things like that, having to go in and say this person is worthy of your support is a little bit icky, but a lot of the time you don't have to go in detail on that. If it's an earthquake, you know, a person is not going to be responsible for that earthquake except if they're a Bond movie villain. So a lot of times you can talk about how you can have a victim who is not responsible for their plight, but not have to go into a lot of detail on that. So that's the identifiable victim effect. And then the third get small category is setting small goals. Do we respond better and do we have better happiness if we're asked for concrete impacts or abstract impacts? And so there are a couple of different studies within this. One is, I want you to support environmental sustainability. That's our abstract. The second is, I want you to increase the amount of materials or resources that you reduce, reuse, recycle. So you have 24 hours to do this. You'll get a follow-up survey on this. So thinking about these smaller asks, people perceived before they did the actions, they perceived this pretty much the same way. They said, okay, these things are about the same in terms of how pro-social they are. They said we're about the same on how likely they are to complete the goal and how much of a challenge that goal is. On the effort side, concrete folks were significantly more likely to say, I met my expectations or I exceeded my expectations, and they were more likely to say, I'm happy with the thing that I did, but they had no additional effort. And so by making the ask concrete, you were able to make people's satisfaction with doing the ask higher. And we all know that the greater the satisfaction of someone's volunteering or donation experience, the more likely they are to repeat it. So having that one concrete action that is your part of this can be very powerful and cause someone to repeat it more. They ask similarly people to prepare bone marrow. Obviously, I practiced entitativity and not bone marrow. Prepare 10 bone marrow donor recruitment flyers and mail them off. They ask some people, you're going to give people with need this transplant greater hope. They gave other people a more concrete, you're going to get a better chance of finding a donor. Similar sort of result. Everyone mailed about the same amount. They thought it was a similar amount of challenge, but the people who were given the concrete task of giving people a better chance of finding a donor were happier with their experience. And so little change in wording can cause a significant impact on donor satisfaction. Any questions on any of those? Any thoughts?
Are there ideas or thoughts about tying the two types of messaging that you mentioned in the beginning, tying those together to one, like starting with a very focused single victim and then broadening it wider, saying with your donation we'll help this person, but also we can do this for 50,000 others, something like that.
Yep. I don't know that I would use the number in this because sometimes the numbers impact, but
Yeah.
I would say that quite often in these appeals, you're trying to take it from the identifiable victim. Was it Nakia? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the child's Rokia. So your gift will help other children like Rokia, I think is absolutely in keeping with that identifiable victim effect, and making sure that your gift isn't restricted, and making sure that people know that you're not giving to this particular situation, you're giving to situations like this. And in fact, quite often we're trying to talk about something that's already solved. Like here was Rokia, she was experiencing this. Thanks to the support of donors like you, she was able to get the surgery she needed at her local hospital, where we trained local physicians to be able to perform the surgery. Now, won't you help children like Rokia have this type of impact? And that you're still having the heartstrings impact of that while generalizing to a larger audience. What I wouldn't do is kind of the statistics parade that they did in the study, where it's like we tell this story and then we go into all of the different numbers that would be impacted there. So yes, I think you're right on.
But still, yeah, leaving the statistics part off. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, for testing roundtable, we take off November and December because we have enough to be doing during end of year giving by and large. So we'll try to pick this back up, I believe, in February. In the meantime, shoot me over any tests that you'd like to cover or any topics that you'd like to cover, something that came off that you're interested in here. Maybe you want to hear more about the impact of chatbots and AI and things like that, or you're interested in that ask string, more about that. Happy to cover whatever you want on these calls. So thank you all very much for your time and have a great day. Thank you.